For years, Evelyn Jones stood in the shadow of her husband, Bishop Noel Jones, maintaining the image of a perfect marriage while silently enduring the pain of betrayal and lies. But now, after years of silence, she is finally ready to speak out. In a powerful and emotional revelation, Evelyn shares the truth about her relationship with the bishop, exposing the secrets and struggles that were hidden from the public eye. This is her moment to reclaim her voice, to step out from behind the facade, and to tell her side of the story, unburdened by years of silence. The facade of perfection. A marriage under strain. For years, Bishop Noel Jones and his wife Evelyn presented themselves as the epitome of a perfect couple, one whose unity, faith, and commitment to each other were admired by the world. They became a symbol of strength, not only in their personal relationship, but also in their devotion to their community and to God. Together, they were the picture of an unshakable partnership, one that others looked up to with admiration and respect. Their public appearances, from church events to conferences and social media posts, showcased an image of harmony that seemed untouchable. Evelyn stood proudly by her husband's side, always with a warm smile, always poised and graceful. The couple's life appeared to be nothing less than a modern-day fairy tale. Their social media accounts were filled with heartfelt messages, carefully curated images, and snapshots that captured moments of love and laughter. Each post painted the picture of a relationship rooted in deep faith, mutual support, and shared values. The world watched as they presented a flawless exterior, two people bound by love, devotion, and a common mission. Their union was seen as a beacon of hope and inspiration for many, and their influence in the religious world grew with each passing year. To the public, Bishop Noel Jones and Evelyn were a power couple, admirable, aspirational, and seemingly untouchable. But as the years passed, the truth about their marriage remained locked away, hidden beneath the surface of this carefully constructed facade. The reality of their relationship was far different from the polished image that the world admired. Behind the smiles, the posed photographs, and the speeches delivered to eager audiences, there were cracks that began to show. Cracks that only Evelyn truly saw and felt. For decades, she kept those cracks hidden, not out of shame or embarrassment, but out of a desire to protect the image they had built and the family they had created. She remained silent, playing the role of the perfect wife, the supportive partner, even when her own happiness was sacrificed in the process. The silent struggles, a life of hidden pain. At 74 years old, Evelyn has finally found the courage to speak out. The time for silence has passed. The weight of the years spent harboring unspoken truths has become too much for her to carry alone. She is no longer content to live behind the mask of perfection, a mask that she had worn for so long to shield the world from the painful reality of her marriage. This decision to speak out is not born from anger or resentment, but from a deep need for personal closure, a desire to reclaim her voice, and a longing to tell her side of the story. Evelyn's decision to break her silence has taken the world by surprise. For decades, she was the picture of composure and grace. A woman who seemed unshakable in her support of her husband and their shared mission. Now, in a deeply emotional interview, she is ready to share the truth, what it was really like to be married to one of the most influential religious figures of our time. As she begins to recount her journey, the calm, composed woman that the world knew fades into a more vulnerable version of herself. The smile that once defined her public persona is replaced with a thoughtful, reflective expression as she delves into the past. In the early days of their marriage, Evelyn recalls, things seemed like a dream come true. She was young, full of hopes and dreams, and deeply in love with her husband. Bishop Noel Jones, at that time, was not yet the renowned figure he would later become. They were both just two people, deeply committed to their shared faith and to each other. Evelyn speaks fondly of the early years, of the love, the promises, and the unwavering belief that their union would last forever. She remembers their days as a team, supporting one another as they navigated life's challenges. Together, they built something beautiful, something that seemed destined to last. But as the years went on, as Bishop Jones's fame and influence in the religious world grew, something began to change. The man she had married, the man who had once been her closest confidant and partner, began to slip away. The promises he had made to her, the ones they had built their future on, began to fade into the background as his attention and energy became increasingly consumed by the demands of his public life. Evelyn tried to hold on to the belief that things would get better, that their bond would remain strong, but she began to feel the distance between them growing wider. The emotional toll, a deteriorating bond. As the years passed, Evelyn began to notice subtle changes that no one else saw. The late nights that turned into early mornings, the long hours spent away from home, the increasing number of people who seemed to take precedence over their relationship. There were moments when Evelyn felt like a shadow in her own life, a figure in the background while her husband basked in the spotlight. The man she had married was becoming someone she didn't recognize. She had always been the supportive wife, the one who stood by him through thick and thin. But over time, the emotional toll of their relationship began to weigh heavily on her. In those moments, Evelyn would retreat into herself, trying to process the growing distance between them. She would find herself in tears, mourning the loss of the closeness they once shared. But she kept those feelings locked away, unwilling to speak out, unwilling to admit to anyone, including herself, just how bad things had become. She wanted to believe that things would change, that her husband would return to the man he once was, the man who had promised to love her forever. But as the years passed, that man became harder and harder to find. As Evelyn continues to speak about the pain she endured, her voice trembles with emotion. She talks about the isolation she began to feel, both physically and emotionally. She speaks of the nights spent alone, waiting for a husband who was rarely there. The once strong bond that had tied them together now seemed fragile, unraveling thread by thread. And yet, Evelyn stayed. She stayed because she believed in the vows they had made to each other. She stayed because she loved him, and she loved their family. She stayed because she believed that things would get better, that this was just a phase, that they could overcome the challenges they faced. The affair and the financial ruin. A heartbreaking revelation. It wasn't just the emotional distance that began to take its toll on Evelyn. There were other darker secrets that she had kept hidden for years. Secrets that weighed even heavier on her heart. Affairs, lies, betrayals. These were the things that Evelyn had learned to live with. The things that she had buried deep within herself in order to protect the image they had built for their family and their ministry. But no matter how hard she tried to ignore them, the truth kept resurfacing. Evelyn reveals, with quiet intensity, that she knew about the affairs. She knew about the late-night calls, the women who came and went, and the countless lies her husband had told to cover his tracks. It was a painful truth that she had lived with for years, but she didn't speak out. She didn't confront him. She didn't expose the truth to the world, not because she didn't care, but because she loved him. She loved their family, and she didn't want to destroy the perfect image they had spent so many years building. The betrayal she felt was not only emotional, but financial as well. Evelyn learned that money that was supposed to go to their ministry, was being squandered, mismanaged in ways that were both hurtful and incomprehensible. She couldn't understand how someone who had devoted his life to serving God could allow greed and ego to take over. But again, she stayed silent. She stayed because she didn't want to destroy everything they had built. She stayed because she believed in the vows they had made. in the love they had once shared. Evelyn's decision to finally speak out is an act of courage, a reclaiming of her own voice after decades of silence. It is not an act of revenge, but one of healing, one of self-empowerment. She is telling her truth, the truth that has been buried for far too long, not to tear her husband down, but to give herself the freedom she has longed for. The woman who once stood beside Bishop Noel Jones is now standing alone, but she is standing strong, ready to share her story with the world. And for the first time in a long time, she is no longer afraid. The weight of silence. Evelyn's years of silence were not just about maintaining the facade of a perfect marriage. They were about protecting the image they had so carefully constructed. For decades, she had smiled for the cameras, stood beside her husband at church events, and shared their seemingly flawless lives with the world. She had played the role of the devoted wife, always supporting him, always in the background, never questioning the narrative they had built together. But the truth was, it had taken a deep emotional toll on her. As the years passed, the cracks in their marriage became more pronounced, but Evelyn kept her pain hidden, protecting her husband and their shared image at all costs. "I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to hurt our family," Evelyn confesses, her voice breaking the silence that had surrounded her for so long. "I stayed silent because I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought if I kept quiet, things might change, that things might go back to the way they were. But silence isn't always the answer." The hidden struggles. The public had always seen Evelyn and Bishop Jones as a model couple, the epitome of faith, love, and devotion. They were the perfect partners, always supporting one another in front of large audiences, sharing inspirational messages, and offering wisdom that many looked up to. Their marriage was a symbol of strength and unity, and their followers admired them for it. But behind the smiles and the media posts, there was another story. One of betrayal, emotional isolation, and disillusionment. Evelyn recalls the early years of their marriage, a time when she believed in the promises her husband made, a time when their love seemed like a fairy tale. At first, everything had felt perfect. They were a team, bound by faith and mutual respect. They shared joy, success, and deep connection. But as Bishop Jones's fame grew, so did the distance between them. His rise to prominence meant more time spent in the spotlight and less time focused on their relationship. Evelyn had begun to feel like a mere shadow in the background, a figure who was no longer truly seen. The emotional isolation began to creep in, and the love she once shared with her husband started to fade. "I didn't see it at first," Evelyn says, her voice soft, reflective. "I wanted to believe in the promises he made me. I wanted to believe we were still the same couple, still that same team, but somewhere along the way, I didn't recognize him anymore." The breaking point, the moment, everything changed. Evelyn's moment of reckoning came when everything she had been ignoring, the lies, the betrayals, the growing emotional distance, came crashing down all at once. This wasn't just another affair or another lie. This time, it was different. It was public. The scandal made headlines. It was no longer something she could ignore or brush aside. "I had to see it with my own eyes," Evelyn recalls, her tone growing heavy with the memory. His actions were laid bare for the world to see. It wasn't just private anymore. It was out in the open, and that was it. That was the last straw. The scandal shook Evelyn to the core. She had always protected her husband, stayed silent, and hoped that things would change. But now, as the truth was revealed to the world, she realized she could no longer stay in the shadows. The man she thought she knew was no longer the man standing beside her. The love they had once shared had been replaced by betrayal, and Evelyn knew it was time to reclaim her voice. A decision for self-respect. "I stayed silent for so long because I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to hurt our family," Evelyn continues, her voice tinged with a mixture of sorrow and strength. But when the lies became too much to bear, I knew I had to take control of my own narrative. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't keep being the woman who stood by him silently suffering. I had to speak out for myself, for my dignity. Her decision to speak was not driven by anger or bitterness, but by a deep need for justice. Evelyn wasn't just speaking out to expose her husband. She was reclaiming her life, her voice, and her own sense of self-respect. She was no longer willing to live in a world of lies, to remain a silent victim of the emotional and mental abuse that had plagued her marriage. After all these years of silence, I couldn't protect him anymore. Evelyn says, her voice now firm and resolute. I couldn't protect a lie. The truth needed to be heard, and it was time for me to speak. The media frenzy, a world in shock. The moment Evelyn spoke out, everything changed. The media frenzy was instantaneous and relentless. News outlets, tabloids, and social media exploded with the revelation of Bishop Noel Jones's betrayals, and the world watched in shock. The man they had once admired was now at the center of a scandal that seemed to shatter his reputation beyond repair. Evelyn's decision to speak out had turned her from the quiet, supportive wife into the woman at the center of a media storm. I had no idea what would happen next, Evelyn admits, her tone still tinged with disbelief. When the story hit the headlines, it was like a bomb went off. The world was watching. People were reacting in ways I never could have imagined. The reactions were split. Some people supported Evelyn, applauding her for finally speaking out after years of silence. They saw her as a woman who had endured unspeakable pain and was now taking control of her own story. Others, however, accused her of betraying her husband, of trying to destroy the legacy he had worked so hard to build. Some saw her as a bitter woman, a scorned wife seeking revenge, while others saw her as a brave and strong individual who had simply had enough. The aftermath. A battle for truth. The fallout from Evelyn's revelations was not just a media frenzy. It was a battle for truth, a battle that would change the course of her life forever. The public perception of Bishop Noel Jones began to shift dramatically. His supporters, who had once viewed him as a man of integrity and faith, began to question everything they had believed about him. The once charismatic preacher, who had been a beacon of hope and inspiration to many, was now being called into question. Meanwhile, Evelyn remained firm in her decision. She was no longer just a wife standing behind her husband. She was a woman reclaiming her truth, her dignity, and her right to speak her own story. "I didn't do this for revenge," Evelyn says, her voice resolute. "I did this because I had to. I couldn't keep living in the shadows, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. The truth had to come out, and it was time for me to speak." The media continued to follow the story, interviewing both sides and fueling the public debate. But Evelyn held her ground, refusing to back down, refusing to let her truth be silenced once again. She had lived in the shadow of her husband's fame for far too long, and now she was stepping into the light. Bishop Jones's response: defending his legacy. In the wake of the scandal, Bishop Noel Jones addressed the allegations publicly, standing before his congregation with his characteristic calm demeanor. As the media storm raged around him, he sought to defend his legacy and restore his image, portraying himself as a man of faith who had always been committed to truth and family. "Brothers and sisters," Bishop Jones began, his voice steady and authoritative, just as it had always been. "I stand before you today, not as a man accused, but as a man of faith, a man who has always been committed to the truth, to my family, and to my calling." His words were met with a mixture of reactions from the congregation. Some of his followers, loyal to the man they had known for years, listened attentively, believing his defense. Others, however, were skeptical, unsure of how to reconcile the man they had admired with the accusations now circulating in the media. "What you have heard in the media," Bishop Jones continued, his voice unwavering, "is nothing more than a misunderstanding, a distortion of the truth. My marriage, my family, has always been strong. We have faced challenges, yes, but that is the nature of any relationship." As the camera pans across the congregation, it is clear that the fallout from Evelyn's revelations has had a profound effect on both the public perception of Bishop Jones and his relationship with his followers. The man who had once been a source of inspiration and strength for many was now struggling to maintain his public image, as his personal life became the subject of widespread scrutiny. The final words: Evelyn's journey to reclaim her voice. In the quiet aftermath of years spent hiding behind the shadows of her husband's fame, Evelyn stands poised, a woman on the brink of reclaiming her own identity. The serene space she occupies is a stark contrast to the media frenzy and public judgment she has endured over the past months. It is her refuge, a safe haven where the cacophony of the outside world fades away, allowing her to reflect on her journey, one marked by pain, silence, and a momentous decision to speak out. Evelyn has spent her life in the background, always in support of Bishop Noel Jones. For decades, their marriage appeared perfect to the outside world. They were the embodiment of success, faithful, devoted, and enviable in the eyes of their congregation and beyond. She stood by him through every sermon, every public appearance, always with a quiet smile, always just a few steps behind, the perfect supportive wife. But now, in this intimate moment, away from the glare of the cameras, the truth emerges from the depths of her soul, more powerful than ever before. The beginning of a new chapter. As Evelyn finishes speaking, there is a quiet sense of resolution in the air. She is no longer the woman she once was, the woman who lived in silence, who endured the pain of her husband's betrayal while maintaining the image of a perfect life. No, she is a new version of herself, a woman who has chosen to live for herself, to find her own peace, and to build a future that belongs to her alone. This is not the end of her story. It is the beginning of something new. Evelyn's journey has been long, fraught with pain and sacrifice, but it is also one of growth, strength, and courage. Now, with her voice reclaimed, she is free to write the next chapter of her life,